The first move that was made, that was actually the last move that was made in reference to total control, was 9/11. All other false flags, all other wars, they were all leading up to the never ending war that is the war on terrorism, which is basically the war on the masses of people to expand the idea of authority. So it's the war for authority, the war for mass authority. Other wars could be seen as battles leading up to the ultimate war. The ultimate war was called the War on Terror, which was really the war of the system, the establishment, to impose its authority on the masses of people. The battles were fought, won, and lost here and there to add power, to add weight to the idea of authority. Once that level of authority, once that level of comfort in the masses of people was achieved, then the authority had to kick into the next gear, which is to push the authority internationally. This pushing was known as the War on Terrorism. You didn't have to have an actual enemy. You didn't have to have an actual reason why you were attacking people, because the masses of people were driven by emotion and they would just follow anything that the authority believed in or perpetrated onto the minds of the people. So they told you that there were weapons of mass destruction. They told you that there were these certain people who attacked the centerpiece of authority around the world. They told you that those people were connected to people in Iraq, and not even loosely connecting. There was no connection between Afghanistan and Iraq. They just said it. And just because it was said, that grip of authority on the minds of the people was just accepted. But from outside of the United States, everybody could see what was going on. See, the people in the United States have blinders on in so many ways because we can only see from what we are projecting outwards, whereas other people can see from being hit. This is where the actual revolution started, because that last move was realized. It was being made by the rest of the people around the world when 9/11 jumped off. So the actual war was taking the time and the energy away from the masses of people, but it was also being used as a distraction. Usually these distractions can last for 10 years, maybe a few years after that 10 years, but after 10 years, things start to die down. The system knows this. So they knew after 10 years after 9/11 jumped off that something energetically was going to happen in response to what they did. There's always an effect to a cause. They caused 9/11, no doubt. It's known, it's been proven in so many different ways that the establishment created this false flag and caused 9/11, this self-inflicted wound on purpose, to create this war around the world, to enforce their authority on the war around the world, to set the tone, to set the foundation for a worldwide government, a worldwide establishment, which is already there. They have the pieces placed around the board, but it hasn't been formalized yet. So the war created the creation of the glue to formalize this worldwide establishment, to connect all of these pieces that have been put together for so many years and decades. But there will always be the effect once you create those causes. And the effect is the chaos, the response, the intuition, the reaction of the people. And if it doesn't happen immediately, it will very seldom go more than 10 years after. And it will equate to, at the very least, or in many cases, go beyond the energy of the cause. So this system knew once 9/11 was kicked into gear that there will be an effect equivalent to 9/11 that will be coming energetically from the people 10 years later. The chess move response to that energy was the creation of this controlled opposition, of these controlled revolutions. In the United States, in the centerpiece of movement, this was the Occupy movement. The organic 10-year effect in response to the moves that were made by this system actually happened in Tunisia right before the Arab Spring, where an individual named Mohamed Bouazizi, I think that was his name. If I'm mispronouncing the name, I apologize. This man set himself on fire in response to everything that was going on with the way things are in these systems. The unemployment, the scarcity, poverty. This is why he did that. He did this in December of 2010. And this set the spark to the Arab Spring. And the Arab Spring jumped off full throttle, hard. The Arab Spring was the organic version of the Occupy movement, revolting against the system, not asking for money, not asking for anything, addressing the authority system directly and demanding freedom, the grips being removed from this establishment. Once the system realized that this was happening, they needed to demonize them and create more of a fight in order to stomp them out in front of the masses, kind of like publicly lynching somebody or publicly shaming or publicly maiming somebody in order to stop the rest of the people from doing that. This is what all of these controlled systems do, these responses do. So there was a football game, I think it was Port Said, that went down where the government basically closed all the exits to this stadium and started fucking people up. And this was a controlled hit on the people, specifically because of what was going on within the Arab Spring. After that, there was obviously a response, and this demonized the people even more so because they had control over the media. Mind you, the news is not in the United States. The mainstream media is not televising this. Many people don't even know that this is going on as I'm saying this right now. They don't even know that this happened. So in order to control that happening anywhere else, the media kept it under wraps. So we don't know much about the Arab Spring. We don't know much about what happened with Gaddafi. We don't know much about anything. So that fight went on and continues to go on. And when the system realized that this was energetically something that was going to happen around the world, this is when they created the Occupy movement, the one that was going to be televised, because it was televised to be shut down. Not only that, but even more so televised to manipulate the ideas that were being addressed within this idea of revolution. Because on a more personal note, when Occupy Oakland jumped off, almost a month after the Occupy Wall Street in San Francisco, the original Occupy movement jumped off, when Occupy Oakland went down in October 10th, on day one, the thing that really hit me, because I was there on day one for Occupy San Francisco, which was the same day as Occupy Wall Street, September 17th in 2011. So this is later in the year after the Arab Spring, because the Arab Spring jumped off in the spring of 2011 after the self-immolation of Muhammad in December 2010. September 17th, 2011. So the spring 2011, the Arab Spring jumped off. And then the fall, which is also a strategic move, September in the fall of 2011, Occupy Wall Street, Occupy San Francisco, and all the other Occupy movements jumped off. And then a few weeks later, 3 weeks later, I think, Oakland came about on October 10th. When Occupy Wall Street jumped out, you can see right there, they're focusing the movement on what to address. Occupy Wall Street. These are your bad guys. Focus on the money. Don't focus on who's on the money. Focus on who's running the money. Why? Because the power of running the money stands. If you're addressing the people who run the money, you're not addressing the foundations of the money, the color of money. There's a difference between addressing money and the color of money. You address money, you're addressing the corruption. You're addressing the things that happen within the financial industry, within the impoverished industry. If you address the color of money, you're addressing the power of money. And by color of money, I mean the ability to change the power of money. Today, we could be on this money. Tomorrow, we can be on another money. And the money that you had yesterday could be worthless. Who has that power? See, that's where the power comes from. And all these moves are coming from that power. Occupy Wall Street is not addressing that power. Occupy Wall Street is addressing the corruption. Like I said in the last video, the corruption is the distraction. If you're addressing the corruption, you're avoiding and distracting from the realization that that corruption is built into the system. They are aware of that corruption. They are laughing at you when you talk about and expand upon the corruption because they know they make money off of the corruption. It's written into their business plan, this corruption. So you're basically spinning your wheels. So the artificial movement that was the Occupy movement went live after the Arab Spring, the organic revolution, as a means to stifle out any kind of revolution, any kind of movement that was going on, and to eat up all of the other movements. This is what happened in Oakland. Oakland, all of the movements that were going on got sucked up into Occupy Oakland, and when they called in the reinforcements to shut down Occupy Oakland, they shut down everything else that you were talking about. So like I said, on day one in Occupy Oakland, the Ohlone representatives, the indigenous people of the Bay Area of Oakland, were the first on the mic to speak. And this would set me off on my own path, away from the Occupy movement eventually. The first thing that she said on that mic on day one was, how can you occupy occupied land? What are you really talking about? Who are you addressing? Where are you coming from? What are we really talking about here? That was all that was needed to be said to spark off a deeper layer of addressing all of these systems internally for me. But also what it did is it gave me a perspective on the rest of the people who were out there, because those words weren't taken the same way that I took them. They weren't received the same way I received them. They didn't affect other people the same way they affected me. Other people were in so many ways dismissing, discrediting, just completely avoiding that conversation. And that hit me hard to be like, how could you just act like that wasn't even said? How could you not even pay attention to that? And that's when you start to realize that these other people have other agendas. Specifically, so-called white people can't talk to that storyline. So in many ways, subconsciously, they have to avoid that conversation. But they're already in this revolutionary type of mood and energy. So they have to have a specific focus. So the idea of addressing the corruption is very feasible for so-called white people. And just like every other movement in the past, so-called white people were used to usher in a deeper part of the enslavement, a deeper part of the establishment. Same thing happened with the revolution. They were used to control the dialogue, the narrative of revolution by manipulating and glorifying the approach in so many ways. People are celebrating that there's something going on. What is this something going on? Oh, I don't care what's going on. Something is going on. Let's celebrate it. Not realizing that is very dangerous. Me not even realizing it, being in the heart of it, fighting for these programs, this system, and not realizing that this is exactly what this system wants. It wants you to fight and be destroyed publicly. So one, you can stifle the movement, and two, you can control the narrative. Because the revolutionary narrative has been set and it's been glorified in the mainstream and even in so-called truther circles, conspiracy circles, and so on and so forth. And you have your army of people who push this agenda. And all you need to do is emphasize that army of people by creating in-between versions of the mainstream narrative channels. So they created TYT. They emphasized Alex Jones and eventually pushed Trump and the QAnon situation to push even further this distractive revolution, this mainstream revolution. So on a personal note, I stayed with Occupy Oakland and I fought for them for as long as I could until I realized that this is actually working against us. Us being that my perspective has now gone deeper. And the people that are surrounding us are not really fighting for the same things that we're talking about. They don't want to address the foundation of this establishment. They want to fix this system. They think this system is for them. This is not what the people in the Arab Spring were talking about. This is not what they were fighting for. They weren't fighting to get better educational programs and better financial systems and better jobs and shit. No. But people in the Occupy movement were. And they were the ones who were pushed to the top. They were the ones who were called leaders. They were the ones who were put on the television. They were the ones who were put in the media. You had people who were in Hollywood that were on the outskirts of Occupy who were put on these news stations to make it look bigger, to control the narrative. And then once the Occupy was snuffed out, then those people went on and did other things and went back to their lives. And boom, there goes the end of your revolution. So yeah, on a personal note, I stayed in there in Occupy Oakland and allowed myself to naturally observe what was going on and see where I was coming from. And that was right before my transition into what I would call the New Age time frame. I was actually dating a woman at that time who was already in those New Age circles who was trying to pull me away from the Occupy movement. And it was very kind of forceful at times where people were calling me and saying, we need you down here. And I know they didn't really need me, but at the same time, like, if I wasn't with her, I probably would have went down there. But her very adamantly telling me, don't go down there. You don't have to do that. That's old energy. That's low energy. And me just being like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, so I had the perspective of that going on. And then also the perspective of them not really fighting for what, where we're really coming from. But I also needed to know the deeper situation that was going on, this spiritual warfare that was going on, because I was aware of the psychological warfare. I had spent 7 years in the army, so I knew what the physical warfare was all about. I knew the introduction to the psychological warfare, but I had zero understanding of the spiritual warfare. So the New Age community was this kind of open channel for me that I needed to go into in order to break down, or at least get into what was beyond this. And it did exactly what it was supposed to do, which was, for the most part, steal a lot of your time. Yes, it opened me to a bunch of different perspectives. It lightened me up in many different ways. But just like tools that are used in the New Age community, you can't live your life on tools. That's not what it's about. The New Age community overall is just a tool. So those tools are used by the system to steal your time and control, again, the narrative. And I've said in previous videos what that New Age community is used for in reference to worldwide control. They're pushing that one world, one spiritual teaching, we're all one government. But I had to see that on my own. So transitioning from Occupy into the New Age community, that was how I did it. And up until recently, I was still in so many ways celebrating my involvement in the Occupy movement and not realizing to the depths that that was a controlled opposition. I mean, I was aware of it, I knew it, but I didn't know to the depths, like the timeline of how it was rolled out. You had the Arab Spring a few months later. So 10 years after 9/11, knowing what was going to happen, the Arab Spring jumps off organically. Occupy jumps off in the fall, right before winter, which is when you don't want to jump. You don't want to have people out in the streets in the fall because they know the winter's coming up and you're going to lose a lot of your soldiers. If you're going to do anything, you want to do it in the spring like the Arab Spring did, because you'll be powerful through the spring, in the summer, and through the fall. And you'll have built up your energy enough to make it through the winter. But if you start a movement in the fall, you're going to fall because the winter will cripple you. It'll cripple your numbers. So step one of starting the artificial revolution of the Occupy movement in September of 2011 in New York, of all places, psychologically, they focus the attention on what? I already broke that down with the economic problems, the corruption itself, at best. And then internally, you have the people focus their attention on micro versions of the macro storyline that started it all off. Then you have secret groups, like the anonymous groups, out there stoking the fires to continue on that storyline, continue on the manipulated storyline, which sets the tone for the later anonymous groups, the QAnon, and the completely corrupted mainstream revolution of a Donald Trump. In between, you have to take out the people who are a threat to you. So, Occupy Oakland jumps off. 3 weeks after Occupy San Francisco jumps off, the system realizes that this is a threat. This is something that's catching speed. It's getting more energy. They realize what the people of Occupy Oakland are doing. We had tents all over the city hall lawn. We had our own daycare, our own kitchen, a library, different groups of people linking up and talking about forward progress, all kinds of shit. It was clean. They attacked you with the mainstream media saying it was dirty and there were rats and mice down there. But there were rats and mice down there before we got there. In fact, the rats and mice actually left once the people showed up because they didn't want to be around the people. And we had cleaned out that area. But of course, people aren't going down there firsthand to go see anything. So they put on the news that the dirty occupiers are, a health risk. So now they got to send in the cops to shut everything down, which is what they did. And like I said in previous videos, they put their own people out there to interview fake protesters. We saw with our own eyes. Fake protesters get out of these media vans, jump into the crowd, and jump in front of the cameras to be interviewed on more than one occasion. In fact, one of them was actually going to get fucked up, getting beat and getting ready to get the shit kicked out of him. But we had to talk everybody else down because there was some fucking real ass people out there. You're talking about people from the streets of Oakland seeing something positive going down. And then you have these assholes come out there, jump out of a media van, and then they get caught and then start talking about, no, you're fucking lying. They were going to get fucked up. That's a war move. In a war move, you're going to get fucked up. So once we had our own security teams out there, we were showing people like where the cops were coming from. We saw the cops were setting up staging areas to attack us. And since we had our own security teams on bikes and people just walking around, we could call out their moves before they happened. We had radios and everything. We had a team of people in the city hall and a team of people in the other areas that we were posted up. So we were a very definite threat to the overall system. And if this grew, then it was going to be damaging in so many different ways. And it did to some degree. After the first raid that came and shut everything down, which happened like 2 weeks after it started, once we started to establish ourselves and be a real threat, the mayor of Oakland called in police units from everywhere from all the way south of Santa Cruz all the way up to north of Sacramento to attack us and shut it down. So they did. They shut it down. We fought back. There was helicopter units out there. They even had like the MRAP, I think it was out there, that riot dispersing military grade truck that sends all kinds of signals out there to make your fucking skin boil, all kinds of shit. Every camera unit was out there. Like I said, this was on purpose to shut down, to make it to televise. This is what happens when you fight. This is what happens when you talk shit. We'll fuck you up. That's why they had us out there, to televise them beating us up in front of the world so nobody else will do it. Nobody else will fight back. And they hit hard. Flashbang grenades, tear gas, hit Scott Olson, one of the protesters who was a veteran, right in the head with a fucking grenade. He's got brain damage for life. I was out there. They threw a fucking tear gas canister right underneath this lady's wheelchair who was sitting on the front lines. I had to go get her and grab her out of there because there was the fucking police officers threw a tear gas canister right underneath her wheelchair. Televised all this shit. Shit went around the world. And that very next morning, you had people in Egypt holding up signs saying, Occupy Cairo, Occupy Egypt stands in solidarity with Occupy Oakland. That is fucking dangerous. That was powerful. And that was a threat. And this was happening a few days after they assassinated Gaddafi. So this was a big, big worldwide move that was going on that is downplayed heavily. And even people in the truther movement don't even talk about this shit because they haven't really pieced together the timeline of this. And a lot of people weren't out there firsthand. They just think, oh, this was just some shit that went down. No, these were orchestrated moves. And what you're seeing now with this completely commercialized version of revolution happening with just like people like Joe Rogan and Russell Brand and TYT and Alex Jones, these motherfuckers are just the most Fox News and CBS versions of revolution that you can get, being pawned off as actual revolutionaries. Why? Because they're talking about corruption. Like I said, you're talking about the corruption and not the fact that the corruption is built into this system, then you are doing more harm than any good. You are part of the problem because a lot of these people are trying to fix this system. They're not really trying to tear it down. They're not really trying to do anything about how this system works. They're really just trying to fix it. And some of them are put out there to do that on purpose. You think Joe Rogan is trying to address the systems that the indigenous people are addressing? Fuck no. Russell Brand? No. He's all the way on the other side of the fucking water. He doesn't give a fuck. He's at the heart of that shit. You think they're going to say anything in reference to the Aboriginal people of the Americas, of the world? No. They love the creature comforts that they are a part of. You really get into it, which side are they going to stand on? The side that gives them the power that they sit on? Or the people? And all day they talk about how they are speaking for the people. They want the people to speak. They read the comments. These are all fucking full of shit. They don't care. They're a part of step fucking 8 of the controlled opposition of the controlled revolution. So like I said, back to the timeline. Occupy Oakland jumps off, gets raided by the police officers, shut down, stands in solidarity, shakes up the whole fucking world, jumps off. The rest of the cities around the country start doing their own Occupy movement after they attacked us in Oakland. After they started seeing Facebook posts of people in Egypt holding up signs for Occupy Oakland, people all over the cities in the United States were jumping off with Occupy movements. And they were aware this was going to happen. They knew this. They hoped it wouldn't go as hard as it did, because they did end up losing some money after they raided us. That kind of set more fire to our movement. They shut down the camp, but they actually added flames to the fire of the movement. And that's when we had people, regular ass people, who are just like, you know what, that's wrong. That's not the way, shit should go down. Because they were fucking tear gassing, kids, old elderly people, fucking handicapped people. They hit the veteran in the head, gave him brain damage. That just mobilized all of the Bay Area. And sure enough, you had 30,000 people shut down the port of Oakland. One of the biggest ports in the whole fucking country was shut down for more than a couple days. Millions and millions of dollars lost in this general strike. But like I said, that's another version of muddying the waters of the depths of what's really going on here. Backwards progress hidden under the guise of forward progress, because the narrative is being controlled. It's all about, the money, the people who are in charge and all this other stuff. No, it's deeper than that. There's an intention behind this. There's a relationship that these people have to the land. There's storylines that go into the land, and historical storylines that people don't want to address. And these modern storylines are designed to hide those storylines. This is why you have those so-called revolutionary speakers and people out there today. And you have them teaming up. Like, this is why Joe Rogan just recently got all on the nuts of Russell Brand, talking about he's the new news guy. He's the best news guy out there. They have to make it more real for you. So they hit Occupy Oakland. Right after they hit Occupy Oakland, they assassinate Gaddafi, and Gaddafi was getting ready to unify all of Africa. He was the money bags of Africa, getting ready to unify all of Africa in their own financial system with their own resources, cut the dollar out of everything. And once you start doing that, they're going to cut your ass down. So that's what they did. Cut Gaddafi, created more fucked up shit out there, imploded Libya, started shit with Syria, continued the war on terror with all the other nations and shit that was going on out there with Iraq and Afghanistan. After that, the general strike popped off. They televised it, commercialized it, made it into this, this all bullshit with all their celebrities out there. Let it die off over time, because there's only so much that they could do. They knew the winter was coming and people were just going to go back into their houses. Strategically started to hit people here and there to snuff it out. And then once that's snuffed out, then you can have your revolution online, on social media, off the streets. And that's exactly what's happening right now. They evolved Anonymous into QAnon, the Occupy movement into Facebook movements and Facebook teams and truther communities and conspiracy circles, and the rest is history. They let that ruminate for the next few years. Nothing really was going to happen because they already blocked everything out. And like I said, it was a controlled opposition before. They set the tone of what people should be talking about. So now that people can talk in the safety of their home online on their social media accounts, now they will talk about what all these other little micro groups have been talking about who've spawned off from these Occupy movements. Now you can have more control online because you don't have the obvious nature of who's speaking behind these channels. You can see people face to face when you are at Occupy Oakland and Occupy San Francisco. You can see that they weren't talking about what you were talking about, but online they can hide behind the keyboard. So after they shut down the physical movements in the fall through the winter, it didn't survive the winter, and it all went live online in the spring and the summer and on to there, and it just kept on going on from there. And people have the illusion now of revolution online because the next stage of the timeline was to televise and commercialize this idea that new information, new news circles are attacking the system now. So this is why you had the amplification of TYT and InfoWars and the beginnings of the Trump stuff that was getting ready to pop off. But also at this same time, you had the late night talk show hosts, which just exploded all over the mainstream media. And that happened right after these physical movements, because after the physical movements, these little online communities started to jump off and you needed to attack them as well. So the late night talk show hosts were put out there all over the place, online and on TV, in order to shift the conversation from television onto the internet and also amplify the conversation on the internet, because now the majority of your forward-thinking information is coming from the internet. You're also reaching a younger demographic of people, which were the people who were going to revolt. So they threw the late night talk show hosts at you, the comedians, the celebrities. They put their fake movements out there, the distractive movements out there. They talked about the information to some degree here and there. They publicized some of the deep, dark shit that was happening, like with a lot of these little pedophile groups and stuff that were going on and all that stuff. They televised some of that stuff and left it for the online revolution to address. And then when they just don't say anything about it anymore, then people forget about it, because people are like children in so many ways. They're just not going to pay attention to it unless somebody tells them to. So now that all the information, all the movement that's being made is pushed online, it takes the power away from the people on the streets, and it takes the narrative away from the connection to the land and puts it on solely on the idea of money and the power system overall. And what this is doing is actually setting the tone for the next step of pushing authority, because now you've militarized the masses of people with their online communities now, and also militarized the authority over people with the Twitter community and being able to cancel people and censoring information. So now that all the information is now online with these communities, now you can shut down YouTube channels, which is what they have done. Shut down Facebook accounts, censor Facebook accounts. And on a side note, for people who watch my YouTube channel on television, because some people do watch it on TV through like the YouTube app, do me a favor and go to the actual YouTube channel, my YouTube channel, and see if you can see all my playlists on that YouTube channel on the TV section, on the TV version of YouTube, because you can see it online. But I just checked last night and all the other channels show other playlists, but for whatever reason, obviously I know they're censoring my channel, you can only see the uploads playlist on my channel. You can't see all of the playlists that I put down on my homepage on my YouTube channel. And actually the uploads playlist isn't even a tab on my YouTube channel home screen. So yeah, do me a favor and check that out, and if let me know in the comment section what you see, because I'm just curious if it's just for everybody, because I only have the one YouTube app through the TV that you can actually see. And I'm curious because this is just another version of censorship that I hadn't confirmed until now. I know I confirmed it myself by just seeing it, but I'm curious if it's happening with other people too. Because I looked on other channels, like my backup channel, they show all my playlists on there. Other channels show all the playlists, but anyway. So yeah, this is another attack, another version, censoring the information because it's now contained. It's in this self-contained unit. It's another way of controlling like I said, controlling the narrative, because now people are just ultimately lazy. So they're just gonna, it's easier just to check your email than it is to check your real mail. Like you gotta walk, you put fucking slippers on and walk down the fucking street to check your mail. No, I'm just gonna click a button and check my damn mail. So the system knows this. And in order to maintain that movement and usher in a deeper part of your authority, you just put the narrative, put the information that you need out there through the internet, have the strategic people that you need out there to enforce this information, your Russell Brands, your Joe Rogans, your TYTs, RTs, your mainstream news channels, your late night talk show comedians, your spin-offs of all these other networks, your Jimmy Dores, whoever is out there to share what they think is really going on here. You just amplify them. You amplify them and you mute the other channels that you don't want out there, the other information that you don't want out there. And then slowly but surely, definitely through social media channels, the information will be pushed that is in favor of bringing more authority to the system at the expense of the masses of people. So now you have flipped and reversed the idea of revolution to work against the people who think that they're revolting. So this is why you have the Trump people out there who are basically just colored in versions of what I explained in the beginning of Occupy Oakland. You think the Trumpers are really out there agreeing with what the Ohlone indigenous people were saying on day one of Occupy Oakland about occupying occupied land? No. They're very specific of what they're talking about. They want to make their America great again. They want to start the discussion at that point, at the expense of everybody else. And that's why they are televised. That's why that movement is put out there. The same way Trump people are put out there to get beat down and dismissed and joked upon and attacked in so many different ways. The same thing happened. The same reason why they did that to Occupy is the same reason why they're doing that to the Trump people. To make them look powerful. To make the authority look smarter. You got these dumbass people out there. You don't even have to be smart if you're surrounded by super dumbasses. And people who are just completely off base. This is why they're televised. This is why your late night talk show hosts, so-called comedians, go after these individuals, this low-hanging fruit. This is why they do that. And the majority of people are pushed into this space of low-hanging fruit because of the generations upon generations of public education. The education system overall, not even just public education, even private education. The university systems, it's all to lock you into this system of authority in so many ways through dumbing you down under the guise of smartening you up. So they're dumbing down your revolution under the guise of amplifying your revolution through social media and these people like Russell Brand and Joe Rogan out there. TYT, RT, so on and so forth. Even your truthers. Your truthers have bit the bait too. They went after, all the storylines that were out there, because just like the Occupy storyline, the narrative that was pushed through there, the idea of truthful information is just another way of distracting the masses. Because now you have people just distract themselves with the information itself and be happy that they're making money off of it. So they'll just do it every day and then convince themselves that they're doing something positive. That's good enough. And like I said, you're always going to have people who are going to be thirsty for this information, looking for this information. So you're always going to have a demographic to speak to. So some of the smartest people, some of the most revolutionary people that are out there are just going to consume their time a lot of the times because they have to make a living. So they'll take this revolutionary information and a lot of the times sweep it under the rug, because if they speak about that information, they'll lose a lot of their viewership. They'll lose, and viewership is money. This is why your so-called leaders and truthers and all these other channels that are out there, they won't address a lot of the information that I speak about on this channel. Even in the truther communities, I was talking about the relationship that the Aboriginal Americans have with this overall storyline years ago, and I was demonized. I was hit hard by so-called truthers because they thought I was a part of the problem. They thought I was a part of the system because I was bringing up this information. And look, now they're talking about this shit. Mostly because they have nothing else to talk about. And it's hip now. It's trendy now, so they'll talk about this shit. But at the time when these individuals were building up their channels and building up their numbers, they had to agree with their demographic, which was not ready for this information, and attack smaller channels like mine. Still happening today. I don't really give a shit about the numbers or anything. I'm not making money off of this channel, so it doesn't matter to me. But for the people who are making money off their channels, you can see them even more clearly now. It's not just about the money either. It's, like I said, it's the information that's really more dangerous than anything. To not talk about, just imagine if this information, a lot of these perspectives were spoken about, 5 years ago. How much would have been changed if a lot of these people weren't submitting to the emotions of their not as informed demographic following. Anyway, that's pretty much all I wanted to share with this video, is just break down the timeline of these artificial revolutions, this artificial movement, and how the narrative is controlled on purpose, and give a little bit of perspective on my own personal experience with these movements that, and many times and up until recently, I wasn't even aware of. So if you see where I'm coming from with this perspective and you do share information, start to expand on this and share some of your experiences with these groups, with this narrative adjusting authority system that is continuing to grow, because it's going to change again. It's going to evolve again. We're in that 10-year, after the 10-year space now. The Arab Spring was 2011. We're in 2021. So this is the 10-year jump after the initial 10-year jump after 9/11. So this year, we can already see what's happening. That's why I said in the beginning, there's every 10 years something happens. This is why they push those wars every 10 years or so, to distract and control that movement. There's like a 10-year shift in consciousness or something that happens, and the energy needs to be diverted back into the system. This is why they do that. So back then you had 9/11, then you had the Arab Spring. Now you have coronavirus and all this other shit that's going on.